Los Angeles, a world-class city and home to one of the most complex transportation systems anywhere. With its renowned freeways and its ever-expanding public transportation system, the choices for navigating this sprawling metropolis have never been greater. While the future of transportation in LA is still being written, its past sheds some light on what challenges may lie ahead. It could be said that the history of LA transportation is a tale of two cities, one driven by commerce, innovation, and the public good, the other filled with conspiracy theories, legal battles, missteps, and in 2020, a global pandemic. But in spite of roadblocks, Los Angeles has always had an uncanny ability to reverse course, get back on track, and move full speed ahead. In its earliest days, getting around El Pueblo de Los Angeles was slow and arduous. Travel was primarily on foot, over unpaved roads until the late 1700s.
The Spanish arrived with horses and hooved animals, ungulates, and sometimes those are used as transportation devices, of course, and indigenous people fairly quickly take those up themselves.
By the 1820s, El Pueblo de Los Angeles was part of the Mexican Empire. The new Mexican government, eager for international commerce, immediately increased trading at LA's seaports. Paved roads became more commonplace.
That was when you started to see roads being established from the port to the downtown area, which was basically the plaza area. It had not extended very far beyond that at that point in time.
California had become an American state by 1850, and better transportation options like the stagecoach appeared. The westward expansion brought thousands of entrepreneurs to Los Angeles. Among them was a man named Phineas Banning, also known as the father of the Port of Los Angeles.
Banning's main contribution to the transportation of the Los Angeles corridor was the establishment of the rail line between the downtown area and the harbor. And so that was his main contribution to the transportation system as it started to develop between the harbor, which was where the commerce was coming from, to the plaza, which was where the customers were, where the distribution would later start branching out in all directions as the city grew and commerce became more and more of an issue.
Banning's rail line, called the Los Angeles and San Pedro, was built in the late 1860s.
They got the goods, lumber, materials from the port of San Pedro into the heart of Los Angeles. And that was really an economic boom and boon to the city.
Banning's small railroad was later bought out by Southern Pacific and foreshadowed what was one of the biggest transportation milestones of the 19th century, the Transcontinental Railroad. The rail line was considered one of America's greatest technological feats and completed in the late 1860s. The Transcontinental ran from the East Coast to the San Francisco Bay Area, and in the mid-1870s, it was extended to Los Angeles.
Well, what that did was that connection from San Francisco to Los Angeles made Los Angeles accessible to the markets in San Francisco. It cut travel time, whether it was for goods or for people, to a day or several days as opposed to weeks as it had been in the past.
That is a fundamental reorientation of California's economy and industrial landscape, because now you've tied California. It had already been tied by telegraphy, But now through transit of goods and people, you've tied California to all the rest of the United States in one fashion or another. So it's fundamental and it changes everything.
This innovative means of transporting people and freight grew both LA's economy and its population exponentially. Now, snow-weary Easterners had a faster, easier way to go west and realize their California dream.
Well, as people started coming out to Los Angeles from back east, and they started looking around, they discovered, we kind of like it here. And so they decided to stay, and that meant that not only was the community of Los Angeles starting to expand and the population increase, but now they were expanding out to other areas that were open for habitation really for the first time. Places like Pasadena, places like Glendale and Burbank, San Gabriel.
In the 1880s, the choices for getting around Los Angeles had increased tremendously.
Horse and buggy, wagon, walking, stagecoach, railroads, bicycles have made their appearance. And so we do have multiple ways of moving around that landscape. And then the next fundamental change is the increased trollification of Southern California.
For 5 to 10 cents, the general public could now travel to more distant parts of the city, making the trolley a runaway hit.
Using streetcars as modes of transit across longer and longer distances in Southern California becomes the practice of a lot of transit opportunities by the last 20 years or so of the 19th century.
As the remarkable 19th century came to a close, the choices for transportation must have certainly seemed breathtaking. But just when it looked like Angelenos had seen everything, along came the automobile. And it was love at first sight. Within a few decades, Los Angeles had the highest per capita number of automobiles in the country.
Well, being able to buy an automobile was giving you not the key, just the keys to the automobile, but the keys to being able to go anywhere you wanted. Pretty much any time you wanted to go. The automobile gave people a sense of empowerment.
Besides the automobile, the abundance of streetcars and light rail in the early 20th century gave Los Angeles residents more options about where to live. The cleaner, fresher suburbs were now a choice thanks to businessman Henry Huntington.
Henry Huntington's imprint upon the transportation history of Los Angeles is more profound than any other single individual.
Known as the father of LA urban planning, Huntington owned LA Railways and Pacific Electric Railway. His yellow streetcar made stops in the center of town, and his interurban red car service went to the San Fernando Valley, Orange County, and anywhere else where he and others may have owned land.
His monopoly ownership of the trolley systems within LA City and then again in LA County mean that his companies are deciding in the early couple of decades of the 20th century, deciding where those trolleys go.
This was literally one of those if you build it, they will come moments. What Huntington and the others did was that they ran the trolley lines out to these areas where they owned the land and it was completely unoccupied. So what they decided to do was they were going to subdivide the property, they were going to parcel it out, they were going to build on it. The land was cheap, they owned it, they could do all of that, and they'd make money hand over fist in the process.
Soon, the streets of Los Angeles were filled with train tracks, not only for the local streetcars, but also for the rail giants like Santa Fe and Union Pacific.
By the 1900s, they were all competing for space on the city streets. It was Los Angeles was a bowl of spaghetti of railway tracks. And there was a lot of unfortunate interaction between the railways and pedestrians, the railways and horses, the railways and those newfangled things called automobiles.
There was also confusion. The rail companies each had separate terminals. An outraged public demanded change. They wanted a single depot or a Union Station, like many other American cities. But Southern Pacific, Union Pacific, Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe did not agree.
So they pursued the railway companies, who resisted vigorously. This actually went to the California State Supreme Court twice, and then on to the United States Supreme Court over a 16-year period.
A few years later, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that the rail companies could be ordered to start building Los Angeles Union Station. But while many Angelenos celebrated the legal victory, over in Chinatown, lives were about to change. It had been decided that most of what is now referred to as the Old Chinatown near Alameda Street would be demolished, and that land used to build the new Union Station. For residents of Chinatown, the future was now very uncertain.
The Chinese Exclusion Act was in place. New immigrants could not become citizens. So you're forever alien and not allowed to become a part of society, not allowed to become a true contributing part of society.
In the end, 60% of Chinatown's residents and businesses were displaced. Historians say some of those who lived through the relocation clearly recalled that no one ever offered to pay them for their move. One of those people was businessman David Lee.
David's family had run the Manjinlo restaurant on Marshall Street in Old Chinatown for a whole generation. So they were very much rooted in the community. But when the day came when they were told they had to move, they tried to negotiate for some assistance. And when we, the Chinese Historical Society, specifically asked him if they received any compensation or any assistance, his comment was, "Not a penny. Not a penny."
As fate would have it, LA's new Chinatown was relocated about a half-mile away, and the building of the multi-million-dollar Union Station commenced. During the Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt's Works Progress Administration had begun identifying traffic safety problems and congestion in the now car-centric Los Angeles. The WPA documented the need for a highway system in LA that would allow for the free flow of traffic.
The concept of the freeway was a single piece of road, completely free of challenges, whether they were traffic signs or traffic lights, pedestrian crossings, railroad crossings. There should not be anything to prevent you from being able to drive 15, 20, 25, 30 miles all at once.
The concept turned into reality, and by late 1938, the first segment of the Arroyo Seco Parkway, also known as the Pasadena Freeway, was built, making it the first freeway in the western United States. It was later placed on the U.S. National Register of Historic Places.
It was significant for Los Angeles because people were traveling longer distances than is typical in many American cities. Distances from, for example, Pasadena or Long Beach to downtown. And that meant that higher speed would have great benefits to those commuting over longer distances.
And in 1939, an impressive Los Angeles Union Station opened with a star-studded ceremony, attracting 500,000 people. It was the epitome of sophistication and put LA on the map.
We knew that this was something big for the city. This is rail traffic coming in, and this is first-class passenger rail, and it's a big deal.
The wartime rationing of rubber and oil in the 1940s forced many Angelenos out of their cars and back onto streetcars again. For years, the streetcars had proven to be immensely popular in Los Angeles.
The latest in big town transportation on rail.
This short film shows actress Shirley Temple helping to inaugurate one streetcar line.
Get ready for the first trip on your beautiful new streetcar. All aboard!
Shirley, here's the fare.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Here you are, Shirley.
Thank you. Thank you.
But after the war, Angelenos got back into their cars, and the demise of the LA streetcar began. This is also when the enduring conspiracy theory took hold. The theory is that big automotive corporations bought up streetcars with the intent of forcing the public to buy their gasoline-fueled cars and ride on the buses that they manufactured.
There was clearly a conspiracy because they did join together to purchase the streetcar lines, and they were found guilty.
It started when the U.S. Supreme Court found General Motors, Firestone Tires, Standard Oil, Phillips Petroleum, and Mack Trucks guilty of conspiracy. They were charged with monopolizing the sale of buses, fuel, and supplies to a company called National City Lines. That company also owned LA's yellow car trolleys. But historians say that by the 1940s, LA's streetcars were already in poor condition and were considered too costly to repair.
The streetcars were up for sale at bargain prices because they were losing money, and a number of companies, from Mack Truck to Firestone Tire and Rubber to General Motors, collaborated and thereby conspired to acquire streetcar lines all over the country.
Transportation scholars say the decline of the streetcars was inevitable because of the increasing popularity of the automobile.
And I think the appropriate interpretation is that the conspiracy existed to take advantage of the decline of the streetcars rather than being the cause of the decline of the streetcars.
Either way, those who rode the red and yellow streetcars and trains have fond memories of those rides. 88-year-old Alan Weeks has loved trains all his life. He started riding them as a child.
I used to ride the bus and the streetcar from where I live here in Eagle Rock. And I visited my grandparents who lived in Santa Ana, and that's quite a ways away, and the red car went to Santa Ana, and I used to go down, take the red car, and it ran right through my grandfather's orange grove, and they would stop there and then get off in his orange grove and help him irrigate all day. And then I went home with him and had dinner and stayed overnight when my parents came and picked me up the next day. So I have that really nice memory.
And as a rail enthusiast, Alan rode the very last red car to Santa Monica in 1953.
Well, it was sad because it was an Indyman era that most of us had ridden those cars for years. And we knew we knew at that time they were never coming back, but then we were totally wrong.
There was a return to rail, but it would take another 3 decades.
Hard to believe that 63 years ago we came this way on the last car.
The late 1940s and early 50s ushered in the era of the Los Angeles freeway system. With the help of federal money, several freeways were built. The goal was to relieve LA's traffic congestion and to allow for speed in the event of a national emergency.
By the mid to late 1950s, there were so many different freeway projects being built in the Los Angeles basin that there was one spot where you had 4 freeways literally connect up with each other. It's what we know as the 4-level interchange near downtown. 4 levels, 4 separate levels of freeways. It was probably unheard of back then, and I can't imagine it being even less amazing now.
But building LA's freeways meant the loss of the rest of the old Chinatown and many other unrepresented communities.
Those massive construction projects, they are displacement engines. If they don't destroy, they certainly irreparably change neighborhoods. To have an interstate freeway cutting through which once had been a fairly bucolic or quiet urban neighborhood.
By the early 60s, electric-run streetcar service had just about disappeared in Los Angeles. All that was left of mass transit was a few bus lines, now governed by the newly created Metropolitan Transit Authority. But these diesel-fueled buses, combined with greater reliance on the automobile, were blamed for contributing to the type of smog many will never forget.
It would make your eyes burn. That was a common complaint. My mother had asthma. It made her just terrible in the summertime especially. When I went to college, you couldn't see the local mountains because they were so covered in this gray pale of thick smog that it was, you'd go home and you'd be coughing at night.
But there was little anyone could do about the situation. As a child, Dawn Jenkins lived in a remote part of LA where the bus stops were so far away, her family had to have several cars. Her husband David came to Los Angeles in the 1970s.
The buses, back then it was called the RTD, Rapid Transit District, and of course there's nothing rapid about them at all, but they used to belch big clouds of black smoke out their exhaust every time they started up. And of course the cars never wanted to be behind them because they would inhale all that. It was really bad. And eventually they put tailpipes up the back of the bus so it came out the top instead of the bottom, and then eventually they went to natural fuel so it didn't pollute as much. But it was very bad.
And as Los Angeles's population continued to grow, the need for better, cleaner public transportation was very much apparent. With federal support and local sales tax revenue, Los Angeles began to construct new rail projects in the mid-1980s. Later, LA Metro took over, and by the 1990s, the Blue Line light rail appeared, followed by the Red Line subway.
It is going back to the future. If you look at the beginning of the 1900s, we had a Pacific Electric railway system that really defined Los Angeles. It created LA, and it created the Southern California region. We had hundreds of miles of rail in our area, and that was taken out for the automobile, for freeways.
Since the 1980s, LA Metro has continued to expand public transportation in the city and surrounding areas. By the year 2020, it had 4 rail lines, 2 subways, and more than 160 bus lines in operation.
LA County's transportation system is going back to the future. We are rebuilding our rail lines, we are rebuilding our transit lines, and creating a much more robust transportation system for the residents of LA County.
Many passengers give LA's public transportation system high marks.
I ride it 2 or 3 times a day. It's very important to me and it's excellent.
But the goal is to get even more people to take a bus or train on a regular basis.
Los Angeles has been known as the car capital of the world. It's an onerous distinction. We want to move away from that, and we want to be known as the transit capital of the world. We've got a lot of work to do to get there, but if we can provide people legitimate choices to leave the car at home and use another mode of transportation to get where they need to go, we will be helping mitigate the traffic that is going to be happening on our streets and freeways in the years to come.
However, getting people to give up their cars will be no easy task. For now, a major challenge in the minds of some is greater efficiency.
I think they definitely need to expand the routes and expand the hours of operation, you know, to suit and meet the needs of like a very busy and bustling city. You know, it's like people want to go out and do all these great things that LA has to offer, but you know, it's not necessarily easy to do so, you know, if you're waiting around for the bus to get somewhere.
Another important means of transportation for Angelenos is provided by the City of Los Angeles' Department of Transportation. LADOT runs the ubiquitous Dash buses and express bus service. The department also promotes alternative means of getting around the city, such as ride-sharing, walking, biking, and micro-mobility options.
We're the largest municipal transit operator in the county. In a normal year, we move about 20 million trips. And then we also have a responsibility for regulating taxis, scooters, and electric bikes. So we have a really large portfolio of responsibilities that we have.
The public can also choose to use Metrolink commuter trains and the National Amtrak service for longer distances. In spite of the challenges that may loom, LA Metro is continuing to plan for the future. It has 40 new projects scheduled over the next 40 years. Topping the list are the extension of the Purple Line subway to Westwood, a connector linking all light rail in downtown LA, a Crenshaw LAX project, and an extension of the Gold Line to Pomona. As part of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's Green New Deal, LADOT and LA Metro are committed to the use of clean energy. For example, LA is building more electric vehicle charging stations and plans to offer completely electric-powered bus fleets in the near future to help combat global warming. And in late 2020, Mayor Garcetti announced a major upgrade for public transportation. Hundreds of brand new light rail and subway cars were put into service in 2021. As for the future of LA transportation, officials say it will ultimately be a blend of private sector innovation and sound public policy.
We can kind of play the long game, and we can have policy goals that are about, climate or public health or economic revitalization. The private sector is really good at being very nimble, being very quick, learning fast, and coming up with new ideas and experimenting in a way that we can't always do in government. And so having those, if you have those two things working together, you can really open up a lot of great opportunities.
The private sector is already actively gearing up for the next big invention. One popular concept is the Hyperloop. It is a propelled form of travel that would propel passengers and freight in a tube at airline or supersonic speeds.
Well, we have a tube, and that encloses a low-pressure environment. It's like flying at about 200,000 feet of altitude. And in that tube, you're able to go up to about 700 miles an hour.
And Uber is also ready to take its brand to the next level, literally. There is talk of something called Uber Elevate.
Instead of getting in your car and driving on the roads, you're going to jump in your plane and you're going to fly downtown. Or you're going to fly to the beach. Or you're going to fly down to Long Beach.
So from horse and buggy to train travel, and from the trolley to the automobile, Los Angeles has had an exciting ride into the 21st century. And while we imagine the future, it's really anyone's guess as to what new innovations will come along and truly take transportation to the next level. But one thing is for sure, this time, Los Angeles will be ready.